First at 4, breaking news from Governor Whitmer, what she says needs to happen before Michigan can reopen safely. Paula.
Karen, a small loophole in the governor's stay home, stay safe executive order is actually making it less safe for some who are suffering domestic violence. I'll show you the workaround. Ben?
Paula, the first part of May, fantastic, over-delivered. The rest of it may be garbage, but we're going to look at that forecast right now. First at 4.
Local 4 News starts now with a breaking news alert.
Good afternoon. I'm Karen Drew. First at 4, we are tracking breaking news as we bring you the very latest from Governor Gretchen Whitmer. First, we are being told a system malfunction has delayed the daily report on new cases and new deaths caused by the coronavirus. The state says those numbers may be reported later this evening. As of yesterday, the state reported more than 4,000 deaths. Today, in Detroit, more than 200 general services workers are back on the job with new safety protocols in place. Detroit's mayor says he's working on the city's $350 million budget deficit and could have a budget plan in the next 24 hours. Now, let's get back to the governor. She has been facing growing pressure from Republican lawmakers to reopen the state's economy. Today, she is making her case to stay the course. Local 4's Kimberly Gill in the newsroom with highlights from today's briefing. Kim.
Hi, Karen. Good afternoon. Governor Whitmer has used these briefings to reassure and convince voters that she's charting the best path forward. One of her biggest concerns is avoiding a second surge of infections. And today she spelled out what she thinks needs to happen to make sure that does not happen.
The bottom line is we can't move forward and re-engage everything until it's safe to do so. And that means having enough tests, being able to do the tracing, having few enough cases, and ensuring that our hospitals are ready in the event we see some cases go back up. I'm always going to put the health of the people of this state first as we make these decisions.
The governor says we are closer to being able to handle new cases as the state has significantly upgraded supplies of personal protection equipment. Governor Whitmer confirms the stay home, stay safe order will stay in effect until at least May 15th, she says, even as more businesses have been able to reopen. The governor has just created a COVID-19 Office of Accountability to oversee all spending connected to the crisis. Another focus of today's briefing, primary elections. Yes, in about 50 communities taking place tomorrow. If you haven't voted by mail, at least one location will be open in each jurisdiction for in-person voting. The Secretary of State says if you're voting in person, come prepared.
Please plan to wear a mask, practice social distancing at all times, and clean your hands after voting. This will keep you and our election workers safe while also ensuring you get to vote and that our democracy stays strong.
The Secretary of State says you can find those polling places online. She says mail-in ballots have been a success, and she expects turnout this year to double the average for May elections. Karen, there's much more to discuss about today's briefing. Our coverage will continue on Local 4 News at 5. Until then, we'll send it back to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Kim. It is day one of a new normal for some City of Detroit employees who are back on the job today. This morning, crews were working at Peterson Park on Detroit's west side. More than 100 of the furloughed workers are assigned to outside jobs like grass cutting and pothole patching. Mayor Mike Duggan announced 30 workers tested positive as they were screened before coming back to work. He says safety is his highest priority.
We are making it a point that as we bring folks back together in the workplace, that we are going to do everything possible to screen out those who are contagious, make sure they get proper medical care, and also make sure that if you come back to work for the City of Detroit, you're protected.
Contractors on 16 projects in the City of Detroit are set to return to work later this week. COVID-19 has created dual danger for women and men who suffer from domestic abuse and sexual violence, a combination of fear, uncertainty, and what appears to be a loophole in the stay home, stay safe order has created a new challenge in removing abusers, according to one local shelter. Here's Local 4's Paula Tutman.
Tracy says this is what the doors in her home look like after a rampage by her ex-boyfriend. She says he first victimized her house, then verbally abused her, and then assaulted her last week.
Because he's very manipulative, and I had a lot of feelings for him. It's hard when you love someone. It's hard. And it's really hard now, too. problems for him. I was just hoping he would go.
Charmin Davenport, CEO of Turning Point, says since the stay home, stay safe order, she sees a 25 to 30% increase in calls on the violence hotline. She also believes those numbers underrepresent what's really going on.
What we feel is that there may be victims of sexual assault who may be afraid to come in for an exam because they don't want to go to the hospital.
COVID-19 and the stay-at-home order create a dangerous cocktail cycle of fear and uncertainty. Haven and Pontiac reports a 10% increase from last year, but also believes abuse is being underreported because survivors aren't able to make a phone call to a shelter or an agency because the abuser and children are home with them, which makes a safe phone call more difficult. But there's also a loophole in the executive order that states evictions aren't allowed during the stay home, stay safe order, which could make it more difficult for people living with abuse to escape their abuser. The personal protection order should be the first step in removing an abuser because it can take the place of an eviction order for fast removal.
It is important that we recognize that these situations, especially under the circumstances of these stay-at-home orders and the difficulty we have evicting abusers, are more dangerous than normal. And I would like the police department to recognize that they play a key role and really take the time to explore what's going on.
Haven also says gun violence has increased, as well as threats involving weapons, including strangulation, marital abuse, and rape is on the rise. But again, it's not being reported to police. These shelters believe they want people being abused to know these services are open to them. They are essential services. And again, don't try to go the eviction route first. Go the personal protection order route first, because that is a faster way to get an abuser out of the home. Karen?
Such a complicated story, and I give that woman credit for doing that interview with you today, Paula. It shows the emotions that she's dealing with on so many different levels.
Very courageous.
Yeah, it really is. All right, thank you, Paula. We appreciate it. Members of the U.S. Senate have returned to Capitol Hill, but the House of Representatives has not. The Capitol Hill physician says it's too dangerous for the 435 members of the House and their staff to squeeze into the tight corridors on the House side of the Hill. Senators are also concerned about their safety, but Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says precautions will be taken. In the week ahead, lawmakers will likely be negotiating if another aid package should be passed. The Senate will tackle confirmation hearings for Congressman John Ratcliffe, the president's pick as the new director of national intelligence. U.S. Supreme Court is making history as it live streams oral arguments for the first time ever. The High Court is hearing arguments remotely so the justices can work from home. The live audio will be available for 10 cases this month. Next week, the court will hear arguments over whether President Trump can shield his financial records from state and congressional investigators. Food and Drug Administration is trying to tighten oversight of COVID-19 antibody testing. But before today, regulators allowed tests to hit the market without submitting a proof to the FDA that they worked. Well, the FDA says too many sellers are making false claims. So now companies with test kits on the market without FDA authorization will be required to submit formal applications to regulators within 10 business days. If the proof is lacking, the test could be pulled from the market. Tonight at 5, Dr. Frank McGeorge will have more on the change and the latest test to be authorized by the FDA. First, if you were outside this weekend, you probably saw lots of people were wearing masks and many others were not wearing masks. So what is the right thing to do if you are spending time outside? Dr. Frank McGeorge here now this afternoon with some answers to that question.
First, let's talk about when you don't need a mask outdoors. If you're outside in your own yard with your own family, you don't need a mask. If you're going for a run or a walk in an area where you aren't going to run into any other people, you don't need a mask. It gets a little trickier if you're going to be outdoors in a place where there are a number of people. The virus dissipates much more quickly outdoors, but the more people there are, the more potential risk there is. Back in February, researchers in Wuhan, China sampled the air in several public places and found the virus was undetectable or found only in extremely low concentrations. But there were two exceptions: a crowd in front of a store and a crowd near a hospital. Now, it's not clear if there was enough virus in the air to infect someone, but it's another reason to avoid areas with lots of people, even if you are outdoors. The bottom line, if you're going to be around other people outdoors and it's potentially going to be difficult to maintain social distancing, you should be wearing a mask. Because it's more difficult to breathe while running or doing strenuous exercise with a mask on, I would recommend doing those activities in places where you are not going to run into people that you cannot easily avoid. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Doc. Well, we did see a lot of people outside this weekend. That weather was amazing. We are still seeing sunshine today, but it sure does not feel the same. Let's bring in Ben Bailey. Oh, Ben, Saturday and Sunday were so nice.
Yeah.
And then it
hard to
ended.
believe, Karen, we hit 80 degrees.
Was it really that hot?
It ended fast, yes. Yeah. And we're not going back there. In fact, our temperatures may be about 50 or more degrees colder as we head towards the end of this forecast. Here's what we've got right now, which is 50s. It's still below average, but it's better than what we've got coming forward. 56 right now. You can start to see some of that blue out there in the Plain States. And on this May 4th, here are the weather headlines as we head into the next 7 days. The sun strikes back here early in the week, but we are seeing a return of the flakes by the time we get closer to the weekend, and some hot, light cold for Saturday and Sunday. I'm told that's the cold planet from Star Wars, so I had no idea what that meant. But we'll be back with your entire 7-day forecast in just a few minutes, Karen.
I give you credit for the attempt, Ben. All right, still ahead. Will the retail industry ever be the same after the coronavirus? We have the first bankruptcy filed by the national retailer since this crisis began. Also, a sudden storm puts lives at risk. We'll tell you how these workers managed to survive. And later, you've probably seen the stories on social media. Today, we have 4 things you need to know about so-called murder hornets.